AI will help us to tap into all kinds of knowledge, intelligence. Everything is possible. But love, we have to focus on that vector. That is the future frontier. And communities is the space where relationship, collectivity, bonding, meaning, purpose, identity, all that come into belonging, all that come into picture, human to human connection. So that's the frontier we are in. The very center of Auroville is something called Matri Mandir, the temple of the mother, which practically means divine love. That is the archetype right at the center. Humanity of the past archetype was the warrior king, the fighter. This is divine love right at the center. Now, we have to discover that within us. Without it, we cannot unite with everyone else. Not just with people, but with the trees, with the nature, with the earth, with the water, with the soil, everything. That sense of oneness can come only when we discover the power of love within us.
All right, Manoj, so wonderful to be speaking to you this morning.
Great to meet you, Lily.
And so, how did you start your day today in Auroville? I'm so excited to hear about what life is like there.
We do not have any fixed routine as such for individuals. It is left to us to decide how you want to begin your day, how you structure your day. And in my case, I work from home. I'm absolutely free
Yeah.
to structure my time the way I want. So generally, I begin around 5 a.m. and
Mhm.
some meditations, writing, things like that. Yeah.
Sounds very peaceful. And do you have any, how close are your neighbors for your particular home? What do you look at outside your
Outside my
window
window
when
is
you're
all
getting a soft
trees,
start to
trees,
the day?
trees, and on one side there are two apartments. Uh, these are
Hmm.
our collective housing setups in Auroville, but I happen to live in an
Yeah.
individual house.
Hmm. And is that just because you've
Earlier member.
been sort of grandfathered into the community? You joined
Yes,
at such an
because
early
I
phase?
joined early phase where there was space for individual houses. So I am
Yeah.
lucky one. But this is not a long term plan. Idea is more collective
Hmm.
living.
Yeah. So can you please share the story of how you came to be part of Auroville? And I'll just, we'll get into the specifics on so many things, but just help us sketch out for those who aren't familiar what Auroville is.
Yeah. Uh, yeah,
Small,
yeah,
small version. I know that's a
yeah.
big
I
ask.
came here in Auroville in 95 and
Hmm.
I was searching for meaning and purpose in life. Now, when I look back, I would say that was my spiritual inquiry. And I had begun
Hmm.
way back in 86 onwards, it was beginning. And then I came across Sri Aurobindo's teaching, who is a spiritual master. That gave me a completely new vision of the future of humanity, and I was deeply inspired. Then I came to know that there is a community being built around his vision. So it
Hmm.
took me time to sort out my life and eventually find way to Auroville. So it is Sri Aurobindo's teachings and vision that drew me to Auroville. And Auroville is
Hmm.
conceived as a city for 50,000 people. Even though it is founded by a spiritual master and the very purpose is self discovery and future based on that inner evolution, it is not conceived as an ashram. It is a
Hmm.
place where work, engaging with life, building a society, that
Yes.
became the attractor for me because it is not renouncing life, not becoming a monk, but embracing life and its
Hmm.
complexity from birth to death and building a city.
Yeah.
So that was a fantastic project for me because I was also trained as a designer. To me, this is like a designer's ultimate dream. You're designing a society, a city, and a whole life. It's like a living laboratory where we are at
Hmm.
once the scientists and guinea pigs of this experiment.
Yeah. And you're I guess they call it dog fooding in the startup world, right? You have to like eat your own product. It's a whole nother
Right,
level of
right. And we
integration.
have to figure things out. And especially
Hmm.
when you have fundamental rules of the game radically changed. For example, there is no private
Hmm.
property. It's all collective ownership. And how do you build things that do not belong to you? So that requires a
Hmm.
major inner shift to think. And on the
Yeah.
top of it, we are currently around 3,000 people from 60 nationalities and working with so many diverse perspectives. That's where it gets fascinating, challenging, yeah, an adventure.
I love what you said that this is not like a spiritual
Right,
retreat from the world, right? I think in Thailand where I live, the monastic tradition is so central to I think how people sort of see
right.
Buddhism. But sometimes, maybe this is my own bias, but sometimes I feel a little bit saddened by that because it almost feels that like people aren't allowed to engage with that spirit themselves. Like religion belongs to the authority, and in order to be a true follower of the religion, you have to renounce your life. You have to set yourself apart from society. But to me, the spirit needs to move in children through challenges, through growth, right? So yeah, that's just really beautiful to me how
Mm.
that's anchored in
Yeah, this
Auroville.
precisely was the issue Sri Aurobindo was highlighting, that separation that happened between sannyasin and the householder
Hmm.
and spirituality becoming otherworldly and the very purpose of life becoming
Hmm.
getting out of this wheel of rebirth. And for him that was a mistake that happened in the long spiritual history of India, and then that got scaled
Hmm.
up across Southeast Asia. And it is high time to correct that mistake because very ancient India had an integral approach to spirituality where even kings were
Hmm.
expected to be enlightened sages. And spirituality was meant to be there throughout life from birth to death and not a separate
Hmm.
isolated thing. So that course correction is absolutely central. And
Hmm.
your concern is, I'm totally with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like we're in a moment. I don't know if you see the same thing from your perspective, where we're kind of just going through like a reckoning or a reconciling. But I guess Oroville has been early to this, right? Like, let's take all the things that we have learned. Let's value the ancient traditions and wisdoms, but let's look at the modern world and say, like, hey, we want to do some course correction, and to the point of what we're discussing, some integration, right? It's not about saying the past is bad and modernity is good, or modernity
Right.
is good
It is about
and
integration.
like anything like that. Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious what, if you can give us some snapshots of what Auroville was like when you first joined the community, and maybe some of the big like anchor like changes, some of the big tipping points maybe that you've experienced in terms of how it has grown into its messiness and
Mm.
exploration to what it is now.
Yeah, in 95, when I joined, Auroville began in 68, and it was a barren land. So the early pioneers who came
Mm,
here was regenerating the land. So the whole idea of sustainability did not exist at that time, and green
yeah.
movement was not there. But people were already here because that was the only thing you can do here, because you have to survive in a barren land.
So it's
Yeah, so
necessary
it was
work
very
for
basic
survival.
common sense thing to do, to regenerate the land,
Hmm.
harvest the rainwater, regenerate the soil. So the whole regeneration of the soil, afforestation, all these were the first leg of work. The, transforming the physical
Hmm.
nature to make it livable, and claiming the ecosystem. And in a way, it was historical, for example, in the sense, many centuries ago, the region used to be a forest. And
Hmm.
during the colonization and clearing of the forest, the whole land and the topsoil, everything got washed away and it was dying. So then came these
Hmm.
people, early settlers, who regenerated the place. So, in a way, it is symbolically a rebirth of Earth and the new civilization, new culture. And that was happening during that hippie revolution, when there was the massive
Hmm.
awakening happening in the world. And people were dreaming of an ideal world. And for them, this was a beautiful empty canvas. And so they
Yeah.
gave their life to regenerate and rebuild. So they were working on uh, starting with rainwater harvesting, regenerating the soil, then planting trees, then renewable energies. Like they were making
Hmm.
windmills locally here, small
Yeah.
windmills to pump water and things like that. And
Yeah.
also the early pioneering work in solar energy. Auroville was the pioneer in solar energy already in the 70s, 80s. And
Right.
so many of those activities were built and it was already happening. So when I came, these things were already
Hmm.
settled. So forest was already there, farms were already there,
Hmm.
renewable energy was the buzzword, and sustainable technology, sustainable development was the buzzword. But it had already some 25 years of history in Oroville. Yeah,
Yeah. A
whole
whole
generation gave
generation.
their life to build that. So I moved into a beautiful green space. I did not have to face
Yeah.
the barren land, though there was there was no water supply and things like that. So I was living in a small hut where I used to get water in bullock cart and stuff like that. But it was fun, great fun to live in that kind of a very
Yeah.
basic life. Then in the last 30 years, Oroville has established all the good support systems. For example, I have now an
Hmm.
internet with 200 Mbps connectivity and all that. Everything is there in place. Good eateries, dining halls, everything is. All the
Yeah.
facilities required for a good life is already set up here. So
Yeah.
that transition, plus creating an economic system where Oroville also created many, many craft-based units where they were producing things, generating money for the community. So there was an economic
Hmm.
sustainability. So sustainability was not just physical technological level using appropriate technology, but also financially, is it sustainable? So we need
Yeah.
the material
Yeah.
level sustainability, financial sustainability, then at a deeper level, psychological and spiritual sustainability. Because if you don't have the inner drive to keep going, nothing is sustainable. So, from where do you get
Yeah.
inspiration and self drive? That is what holds the people together with a shared purpose, in spite of all the obstacles
Yeah.
that are there. So that is really the core
Mhm.
of sustainability, that the spiritual sense of oneness and passion and drive and purpose that binds people together into a larger organism. So that is really the wealth of Auroville, because the very founders were spiritual pioneers, and they have given the dream and the vision, and so they are the symbolic representatives and the custodians of the force field of Auroville.
The
Right.
force field,
So
the
when we
aura.
come into the
Yeah.
space, their energy is what drives everything. So that had been our great foundation and success. And Auroville is spread over a large area. So here I would like to come to some of the
Mhm.
challenges that we have discovered in
Yeah.
the process. Like when we have around 4,500 acres of land, but it's not one plot. It is distributed in a large area. So, in the beginning,
Mhm.
if you are to regenerate these lands, someone has to settle down there. So, people were settling in various plots and regenerating. So, naturally, organically, it was a very decentralized development.
It's very
Right.
frontier-like,
It
right?
was a very pioneering work. They were living in
Yeah.
small settlements. So, they all emerged as a communities. So, Auroville is a
Mm.
collection of communities.
So it's not one central planned community, right? There was an organic growth tied to
Right.
each
Right.
little village that all
The
shared
original
in the
vision
vision.
was a one large city for 50,000 people envisioned. There is a master plan for building a city. So
Mhm.
that is already envisioned. But to
Okay.
start, there were no people, there were no money,
Right.
and you had to
You
get
got
the
to get
land. So
there.
we were getting plots. So people were settling in various
Mhm.
plots, and there was no way to implement anything called master plan because we were only having pieces here and there, jigsaw puzzle.
So the land for the whole city, like there was a master plan, but the legal
No,
ownership
no,
wasn't there yet? Okay, so it was just literally one
exactly.
plot at a time. So it's a very hopeful vision that everyone's going to choose to join into the master plan, but you didn't have like the
No,
legal right,
land
much
belonged to
less the
local.
resources to implement it
Exactly, the
right then and
land
there.
belonged to the local
Huh.
people, but we were
Yeah.
buying plot by plot, and then these lands were
Mhm.
getting regenerated. So there was a decentralized, distributed development early on, and at the same time
Mhm.
unified by a common dream. So we have an Auroville
Yeah.
Charter, Auroville Dream, and To Be True Aurovillian. Some of these are the three core documents that lays the framework for our values,
Mhm.
vision, dream, everything, and then the master plan for building a city. And the rest was left free to evolve.
Yeah.
So that decentralized development brought in tremendous diversity, tremendous individual freedom, tremendous creativity. But down the line, when it came to collective decision making,
Mhm.
it became extremely time consuming, process oriented, discussion,
Right.
never coming to consensus. And as you start growing, when you are, by the time you are 1,500, you have various interest groups. Naturally, human nature is
Yes.
such, yeah,
Humans are
the
political.
political
Yeah, we're social
being
creatures.
start forming, and then different interest group campaigns, and the politics starts off. So
Yeah.
what outwardly appear to be a discussion based participatory process, behind it is political campaigns and group mobilizations and stuff like that, and power plays hidden forms. The
Mhm.
outer frontier appears to be, oh, we are all here to discuss together and
Yeah.
all that. But end of the day, human nature, especially when you're coming from various countries and cultures where colonizer and colonized, everybody is together trying to make
Mhm.
decisions, you also have the cultural baggages of the past. And
Sure.
that is what is making you, whether can I trust this fellow. No, one thing is to having
Yeah.
beautiful idea. We all want to be, building a beautiful community, harmony, beauty, everything. But
Yeah.
the moment you are working together, it's okay when you come together for a retreat, workshop, everybody can be very kind and nice to each other. But when you start living
Mhm.
together and put all your eggs in the same
Yeah.
basket, and stakes are very high, and psychological
Yes.
complexity of various cultures come into picture, and that is where
Mhm.
trust building, like how do you trust, build bridges between east and west, colonizer and
Yeah.
colonized, all those issues. Then within the different cultures themselves, having their own internal divisions, so cultural baggages become a
Mhm.
major undercurrent in decision making. And then the
Yeah.
affinity based groupings and politics overlaid on the top of it. But underlying thing is,
Yeah.
I don't trust you. I cannot trust you.
Mhm.
And I'm afraid that you're going to
Yeah.
dominate me. That group is going to dominate
Mm.
us, or this group is going to dominate. Or if there is anyone becoming rich, dangerous. Because we are also coming from a
And the
collective memory
yeah.
where power was misused.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
power is a terrible thing. Love and hate relationship with power. The wounded relationship with power, that shows up, but it doesn't show in the front facade. Front facade is like we
Mhm.
are all in the participatory process, grassroots.
Yeah. Everyone
Yeah,
has manners. They can get along for
grassroots
a meal and
democracy
yeah.
and all those nice vocabulary, but underlying thing is power dynamics. And behind the power dynamics is wounded relationship with power and that
Mm.
baggage.
It's very Yeah, it's very interesting what you point out because we usually think about like people who live in pluralistic societies. We think of that as much more of like an urban phenomenon. But here you have people from very diverse cultures and backgrounds coming in a very settler, frontier, rural, agrarian environment, right? I never quite put two and two together before in that way. It really is like a new kind of society that you have to figure it out all at once. Not only do you not have the infrastructure and you have to create it all from scratch, but you're also having to invent how to have a healthy multicultural society while you're still figuring out like
Right.
governance and trust. And it's not like you had a Discord
Yeah.
server and everyone could like
It
vote
was
electronically, right? You
pre-technology,
had to invent this process
pre-internet.
old
Already these
school.
problems were being addressed.
Yeah. Yeah, everything that we're already learning about DAOs, like you guys already had to figure it out like that way, right? You can't literally just procedurally have every person vote. Like it's not a good way to
Yeah.
create decisions, right? It's interesting. I imagine that first era was a lot easier in some ways because it was just about survival. So the decisions were just
Right.
kind of obvious. It was just whatever was in front of you, right? But it's once there's some level of security, sustainability created, then it's
Complex
much
human.
more the world
Yeah.
of opinions, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
You're on the dot. That when it is survival, it's very easy.
Yeah.
But the moment you get into complex levels of decision making, self organization, that become increasingly challenging. In fact, when I came, I saw that highly decentralized distributed community, and
Mhm.
decision making was a struggle and very long time consuming.
Yeah.
So I thought internet had just come in 90, and I was in Auroville in
Yeah.
95. I thought perhaps internet is the right thing to do. So I got into building our community's internal intranet portal so that these things will enable
Amazing.
community to make decision. That was my fantasy.
Mhm.
Little did I know that the human nature will show up in a very challenging way. So I built our internal communities discussion forum already way back. We were having electronic voting in 98 already. We were trying that
Hmm.
out. But then we had quite some ideological differences as well. That is
Uh-huh.
where, like, we had hippie generation who were like anti-technology, anti-authority, anti-discipline, all that,
Hmm.
everything anti-institution,
Right.
rebellion, and
Rebellion.
individualism, particularly the individualism
Hmm.
of the West and anti-authority together. And Auroville was a paradise for individuals. And Auroville grew into like a little fiefdoms, little kingdoms of these people. So in
Uh-huh.
a way, it was a microcosm of the larger world, because we have people from all over the world and little kingdoms. But now, like nation states in today's globalized situation is fighting with each other, the same way we had our kingdoms. Our kingdoms
Yeah.
couldn't come together. And our like, even when I built our internal discussion forums and things like that, I thought, no, people are all here with a wonderful aspiration, so there will be very beautiful discussions and we can come to consensus easily. No, the suspicions and group dynamics, politics, that became
Mm.
major issue. Plus fake news. Now, when I say fake news, not the
Huh.
modern complex fake news of AI,
Yeah.
but if you are accusing somebody in public space, because the moment
Hmm.
you have a public space, then politics walks into that space. If you want to pull down somebody, then all the accusation starts, and then someone has to moderate the situation.
Right. Gossip
Yeah,
can get
things
out of
go out of
control.
control. So then I ended up playing the role of moderating the space. And the moment you step in as a moderator, then you
Hmm.
are immediately stamped as you are against the freedom of expression. So these
Right.
challenges became very complex, and hardly you cannot figure out what is true when someone is accusing, and then there is always gray area. So it became very
Hmm.
unpleasant psychologically, emotionally. It was not a healthy thing to the collective. Instead of building
Hmm.
relationships, it was building more of, though people love to come online, you get addicted to the online space, but it
Hmm.
is largely the we can say gray stuff, not
Hmm.
inspiring. It is,
Right.
yeah.
Did the day-to-day lived experience still feel good? So obviously, I think so many technophiles think like you. They're like, this technology will solve everything. Hooray. And we almost have to believe in that delusion. Otherwise, we won't try it out. And then,
Yeah,
human nature, reality comes like smacks us in the face. And that's how we learn some lessons. But obviously, you stayed in this
yeah.
community, right? So even though there was like drama and tensions and real governance issues to solve, like did you feel good like
Yes,
living in this
living
community at
there
the
was
time?
like, Auroville was like ultimate place. You can't. To me, I hardly went out from Auroville since '95. This was
Hmm.
really like life, and there is a wonderful life.
Hmm.
Such a thriving people.
Yeah.
People are so passionate about what they are doing. That, like, that's
Nice.
the most amazing thing. You find people who are intensely committed and passionate about what they are doing, and they are so
Hmm.
deeply individualized and diversified, coming together for a collective decision making. That is where the challenge is. Otherwise, individual freedom, individual
Hmm.
creativity, diversity, and also highly
Yeah.
unified community, in the sense we have a common spiritual foundation. So that way we were fantastic, the most amazing experience. But we were facing challenge when we have to buy the remaining lands, or there were land encroachment from
Yeah.
outside or interventions from outside. How do you come together and defend ourselves and protect ourselves?
Hmm. Did you have many people opt into the community, like local landowners who were just like, oh, you don't need to buy the land from me. I choose to
Early
join
years, yes.
Oroville because
In
I
early
like what you're
years, many
doing?
of the local people joined the community, also donated their land to Auroville. But now it is a huge land development, property development mafia all around. Because
Yeah, yeah, there's
yeah,
much more
Auroville became
speculation.
a huge magnet that is attracting
Mhm.
daily 3,000 people are visiting Auroville. And so
Wow.
all the people are looking at, okay, I want a piece here, I want a piece there, and that became a challenge, and we couldn't defend ourselves. And in order to defend ourselves,
Mhm.
we have to come together. And even to consolidate
Mhm.
the land, we have to come together and make decisions. But then the individual interest and the collective interest begin to conflict. Just like now, national interest become a problem for our global civilization, because each nation is,
Mhm.
if it is only thinking about its own interest, our global uh, well-being will be compromised. The same thing at a macrocosm
Yeah.
level. If the little kingdoms are only interested in their own protection, not looking at the larger whole, particularly if we are to build a larger collective economic system and a larger city that will help
Mhm.
a better sustainability and stuff like that. But we have to come together, and there was no way to come together.
Mhm.
So decentralization and participatory democracy, all that became, what was the strength became the weakest, biggest obstacle.
Right, the big challenge
Correct.
to
The process
overcome.
loss. And in the name of process,
Yeah.
you can't make decision. You get paralyzed.
Mhm. You know, it makes sense a lot too, even if you just mirror even something like American politics right now, right? America for so long was such a beacon of democracy, but the thing that came along with it was a lot of processism and proceduralism in order for people to execute democracy, right? And we have so many people who are concerned about like that so-called like deep state. It's like where these are not elected officials even, and there's so much in the system, the proceduralism and the judges and the court orders, and you need to file this thing in triplicate. It's like it's the Vogons in Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Yeah,
Galaxy.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not sure
yeah,
if you're familiar. It's so much
yeah,
humanity can get lost into process. You need something in order to scale, but how do you do that in a way that you keep your original spiritual mandate, right? And you are genuinely looking after the real interests of people. Because when politics emerge, it's not, politics emerge not because everyone's like an asshole, right? Politics just emerge because people are different. And especially as you're pointing out, people who have strongly held beliefs are very individualistic, very passionate. The more passionate the two
yeah,
people in an argument, the
yeah.
bigger it can
This
get.
legalized belief systems, that even like if you look at US, the wealth disparity, huge wealth disparity, and it is perfectly legal.
Mhm.
Now, something is
Yes.
legal doesn't make it healthy for the society. And
Sure.
then the politics
Yeah.
is legalizing all this. And it is controlled by a small
Mhm.
elite who is benefiting from it. And such hidden
Yeah.
elite forms in the societies. And they create bureaucracy that benefits them.
Mhm.
And then there is a contending
Right. Creates a
parties
moat.
competing for the same control. And
Yeah.
facade will be, we want to serve people, but end of the day it is small groups serving themselves. And
Mhm.
that is a hidden human nature, where you see, my vision for the future is better than your vision. You will not say it, but that is the underlying dynamics, and I don't trust you.
Right.
So
Yeah.
whether it is Democrats or
Mhm.
Republicans, everyone say if you win, it is a doom to the world. Yeah,
Mhm. It's a
both are
zero-sum
assuming
game.
that if the other party wins, it is a disaster. So both agree that
Yeah.
future is anyway disaster, whoever come into the picture. So we
Yeah.
have this is a fundamental complex problem of human nature, and technology cannot
Mhm.
solve it, because this is a psychological problem. So our attempt to solve collective problems are largely, one is bringing in technology, the other is bringing in money, and economic
Mm.
solutions or technological solutions. We haven't figured out this is a
Yeah.
psychological problem, And whatever
Hmm.
technology you give, that psychology will you weaponize it.
Right. So if I'm hearing you, you can outsource the solution to technology, to systems, to use money to contract labor or whatever it needs to be, right? But at the end of the day, like the underlying psychology behind that decision still exists. Even if you have many tools in your tool belt, like which tool you pick, that's an opinionated decision in
Yeah,
the first
right.
place.
Like weaponization, whatever you have,
Hmm.
if you are driven by greed or fear, you weaponize whatever you have,
Yeah.
however wonderful the technology is.
Yeah. So do you pray the greed away? Like how have you implemented some
No, there is
solutions to
no
that?
easy solution. This is where we hit the murky side of human nature. That is
Yeah.
where the transformational practice come into picture, working on inner transformation, because the collective unconscious, we are all inheriting a collective
Mm,
unconscious of humanity, and the historic
yeah.
luggage, like evolutionary luggage that we are all carrying from the past, that has to be
Yeah.
washed and cleaned, and individually and collectively, and that requires inner transformational practice, for which of course
Yeah.
technology, money, all that are helpful, but we need to keep this at the center. For example, we have now science and technology enabling, I'm not talking about Auroville, in the world, like
Mhm.
longevity, escape velocity, we can extend the lifespan 120, 150 in
Mhm.
few decades, that is going to happen. But
Mhm.
already in the 20s and 30s, more and more young people are committing suicide. So
Mhm.
one thing is to have the body that is kept resilient and long living, but the it is only the bottle. What is the content inside? If
Yeah.
psychological reality is not beautiful, inspiring, rejuvenating, there is no point in having a body that lives 200 years.
Right.
So we will be
Yeah.
forced to look at this psychological dimension, which is right now that is a critical issue of the world. Like we have godlike technology, medieval institutions, and
Mhm.
Paleolithic emotions, pretty much territorial,
Mhm.
animalistic.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to upgrade and clean that up. Otherwise, we are just animals with powerful
Yeah.
tools, with all the territoriality
Yeah.
and fear and violence.
You spoke about people coming from different cultures, different just different sort of trauma imprints of abuses of power and how that shows up. And you're talking about, yeah, the unconscious, right? And being able to integrate that. I think so much culture um, culture to me is as much of a part of evolution as our biology is, right? There's like, we as humans are so special because we have these like multimodal ways of adapting to the situation. And your culture is in many ways, it's the software layer over your hardware ecological reality, right? I find like I love coming into the playground this way. I find it so useful to think about where certain things come from, and so there are certain like wisdoms that we like have received from our ancestors, from long traditions, that are very useful. But not all of them are equally useful when you transplant yourself in a new ecology, right? Like some things are like, oh no, that was an adaptation for like a northern climate with like very little sunlight, with vitamin D deficiencies, where you have to prepare for long harvests. That can be adaptive when you go, like that ability to like long-term plan, let's say, when you live in a world that's not as abundant as like a tropical jungle. that can be a superpower when you take that into another environment, because then you have this intellectual capacity to manage resources. Amazing. But also it breeds a different kind of culture, right? It's a different relationship to the land and to your neighbors. um, so it is just really interesting to me, because we think about which of these adaptations that everyone is throwing into Auroville, and you kind of have to like duke it out to see like which ones are we going to keep, right? There's something like, if you think about like the hippies started these communes, but in some way the child of that movement, I feel like, is, people will speak more about eco villages and intentional communities. And I think that there's a reason to that, because just coming together is not the point. Like, coming together for an ecological, literally grounded purpose, which, like you were pointing out, like surviving in the land takes away some of your decisions and makes it easier to stay together. But in your case, going out of survival, the intentional part really comes out, because you're like, okay, I can't just run on my inherited programming, right? I can't just, me as an individual, me as a representative of my culture, I can't just let old software keep me running. I have to decide which programs are useful, which are worth keeping, which are adapting, which do I teach to others, which do I learn, right? And it's it's fun to think
Yeah,
about in the abstract, but I try to start imagining what that looks like
right.
in the day to day, and I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed
You're
thinking
absolutely
about it.
right. The legacy software each one carry. Now, how to
Yeah.
erase that, uninstall the past so that we can open to a
Hmm.
new future. That is the battleground. That is a psychological battleground, inner transformation, where the old softwares are
Hmm.
to be uninstalled. And the new ones that are emerging is so radically different. And
Yeah.
at the same time, we are at an evolutionary stage where the our current largest groupings of humanity is nation states. But that has become a
Uh-huh.
problem. It is a legacy software.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a legacy
And when you're
software,
too much
totally.
identified with that, our global civilization
Hmm.
cannot harmoniously emerge. So we have a growing
Yeah.
conflict between nation states. And at the
Yeah.
same time, when the global civilization is emerging, if it wipes out all the cultural diversity of the world, that will be a
Hmm.
disaster. So,
Yeah.
behind the political nation states, there is a cultural nation state. Or it's not a nation
Uh-huh.
state, it's a cultural unit with its own unique genius. A unique experience grew over a particular region of Earth, and it has something to contribute
Hmm.
to the larger collectivity. So, if we look at from an evolutionary point of view, evolution is moving from simple to more and more complex harmony and unity. So, when we become a global civilization, if it wipes out the diversity, then it is a step backward in terms of evolution. So, we
Yeah.
need to retain the diversity. At the same time, we have to unify globally one civilizational value
Yeah.
and diversify where the cultural
Hmm.
accumulation from the past become useful, very very, like the genius of each
Yeah.
culture, the rich wealth of each culture, how to preserve it so that it is not exactly the same coca-cola and burger across the planet. That is not the idea
Yeah.
of a global civilization where there is such a tremendous
Agreed.
diversity across the world. We have to preserve the diversity. If we have to preserve the diversity, this is where what is worth keeping and what is to be dropped, and regional
Hmm.
individualization of the collectivity. Like that is why
Hmm.
Auroville is conceived not even as an intentional community, but as a self-supporting city that can
Hmm.
individualize and have a localized culture, a unique culture
Yeah.
of its own. At the same time, it can be universally plugged into the world. So,
Yeah.
economically, it is
It's like,
conceived as a self supporting city where you produce for local consumption. so that it can sustain itself and individualize. Just like a single
Mhm.
individual can individualize and become a conscious adult, same way a collectivity can individualize. And that is the evolutionary
Yeah.
stage we are in. In a way, that is the, I would say, the post national stage of evolution, where transnational
Mhm.
collectivity is forming, where people from across
Yeah.
the nations, across the cultures coming together and melting into a new culture, which is universal and the local at the same time. So it is a
Yeah.
like a new stage in collective evolution. I would say uh, the evolution of the collective being, where it can be far more powerful than a nation state. When, say, 50,000 people come together consciously and unite, it can be
Mhm.
far more powerful than the sluggish, huge nation states.
And that power comes from the shared culture and vision, or what form of
All
power are you
types of
referring
power.
to?
Uh,
The power of the vote,
not,
the
not
power
voting
of
is belong to, I would say, past legacy
yeah,
software.
yeah. Yeah, this is where I'd love to sort of understand then. Like what are the forms of power that you're referring to in this
Say,
era that we're trying to like
in
usher in?
2022, Chat GPT was unleashed, and there were only 150 people. 150 people came together and worked with a common purpose and vision, and world changed.
Mhm.
And it is not through voting they change the world. It is pure
Yeah.
creativity. You are pushing the boundaries of human imagination and creativity. So
Mhm.
today's power, it is not with the nation states. It is this smaller groups coming together, harnessing their creativity, imagining a future, manifesting it. And they
Mhm.
become front runners of collective evolution. And in a way, the corporate houses are the powerhouses of today's world. Nation states are only
Right.
holding markets.
Yeah, I hear you. The it's we're basically talking about value creation as power. Then does that make sense? Like the groups, the whatever size unit, whatever legal entity doesn't matter. But it's the point that is like a group of people coming together to create a new form of
Right.
value.
And in
Okay.
that, even
Okay.
like technology come into picture. All that
Yeah.
become
Exactly.
the
Mm-hmm.
means towards collective transformation. So here is where
Mm-hmm.
fundamental difference in the revolution that is undergoing, like Russian
Yeah.
revolution, French revolution, all this had enemy out there, and you have to
Yes.
come together and kill the enemy and take over the governance. But
Yeah. And here you have to kill the ego, kill the past self,
then you
integrate the
realize that you
shadow.
become the obstacle to the progress. You repeat the same mistake,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you just
Right,
replace the
right.
old one, but you are the new block.
I hear you. It's in those story archetypes, instead of man against world, it becomes man against himself in a way. With this time, man not just being the individual, but the collective of Auroville. It's the same journey, the inner journey that you're talking about that everyone has to go through. Is it's not just a yeah, it's like a phase change that's
Yeah, that
required for all the
enemy
residents
is
of
not out
Auroville.
there. It is not the shadow projection.
Yeah.
Usually there is a shadow projection. This happens in the collectivity. When we come
Mm,
together as a community, there is a
yeah.
shadow projection which we don't sufficiently understand. The enemy out there is a big
Yeah.
problem, psychological problem,
Hmm.
which is perpetuated by all the movies with the hero villain framework. Without a villain, we
Yeah.
don't know how to go forward. We don't know how to come together
Sure.
without an
Sure.
enemy. That is a fundamental
Yeah.
legacy software problem. The underlying structure
Mm,
is, if you have an enemy out there, we can come together.
yeah.
That won't work.
So I'd love to hear then like about your personal spiritual evolution and your growth as a designer, as a resident of Oroville, like going like seeing all these changes that are required. Like what changes um have you gone through in your 30 years?
Yeah, it comes back to uh, inner work as the foundation. And for the inner work, the very baseline is, I think I had to break it down into four steps. Like, initially,
Hmm.
we experience ourselves to be dependent. As children, we are dependent on the parents and this
Hmm.
and that. Then we become
Yeah.
independent financially, psychologically, emotionally. We become independent. That's the second stage. Third stage is where we discover that we are actually interdependent with other people, ecosystem, all that. Fourth stage is where you discover it is not even interdependence, it is one reality, unbroken.
Hmm.
What appears to be separate and divided is purely a cognitive limitation. Reality is one undivided thing, but we are experiencing it as a fragmentation, as a multiplicity, where the other is sometimes appearing to be dangerously scary and I have to defend myself against it. Now, that's, in a
Hmm.
way, we can say it is a virtual reality interactive immersive role playing game where
Yeah.
you are this whole world. You are the world, and it
Hmm.
is your own inner psychological process that is projecting and manifesting your reality. Now, this is one of the fundamental discoveries of Indian spiritual masters. What they say, I am the creator, Aham Brahmosmi,
Yeah.
where I am involved in manifesting the reality in which I am living. So I need to understand how this creative manifestation is happening. And that requires
Yeah.
understanding your thought, your imagination, your emotion, your sensation, your action, everything. And you're tuning there. And then you see that your outer reality is shifting. The way you are
Yeah.
experiencing the world is shifting. And if the
Yeah.
world is one thing, and if the world is not an enemy out there, what is the nature of the world, or what is the nature of existence fundamentally? And that is where spiritual realization come into picture. It is ananda, like
Yeah.
in Indian tradition we say it is sachidananda. It's a blissfully conscious existence, dancing and creating abundantly. It's a dancing ecstatic dance of one being, one consciousness, one existence.
Hmm.
So how do I see it, and how do I enter into relationship with that one being, one existence? That is the spiritual
Hmm.
growth. So from that point of view, you're looking at yourself. How is your cognitive system working? Is it
Hmm.
fragmented, or is it moving towards unity where you are experiencing oneness with a larger being? And oneness is an experience of love. And
Yes.
here comes the next stage in our collective evolution. To say, let's say our first stage of collective evolution or technological evolution was harvesting power, whether it is wind power,
Hmm.
steam power, eventually discovering there is electricity. Now we are harnessing electricity and running all the cities, machinery, everything, created abundance, material abundance. Now second stage has
Hmm.
already stepped in. We are harnessing intelligence. Intelligence, just like electricity
Yeah.
is there in nature, there is intelligence. And now we are able to tap into intelligence, and we can use that intelligence to create abundance. But
Hmm.
power and intelligence or corresponding knowledge about the world is only just two dimensions of the being. There is third dimension of the being, which is love. Like, being flows out in three different vectors: power, knowledge, and love. These are the three vectors of our the being.
Ah.
Now, biggest scarcity in the world is love. The reason why young people are committing suicide is, first of all, there is no meaning and there is no love in
Yeah.
life. Bottle is empty. So what's the point in having a bottle that lives 200 years if it has no meaning and
Yeah.
it has no love and ananda of love, the joy of love? So this is where technology is also leading us. That means
Mm.
in the last 300 years, the whole revolution was based on the idea of scientific revolution. I think, therefore I am. Power of thought, rational intelligence was our cutting edge gift.
Yeah.
Now, in today's
Yeah.
world, that is not what makes you
Right.
unique.
We've maxed out the
Yes, we
usefulness of
maxed
that
out that.
tenant, perhaps.
And just like we don't need
Yeah.
muscle power, we can use a car to travel. We don't use muscle power. Now we don't use the labor of thinking to go next. So then what is the purpose of this human body and the very heart of it? The container. See, this is where the
I
human
see where
body
you're
evolution
going.
is bringing it to the edge where we can tap into the love that is uniting everything. It is the underlying thing. And
Hmm.
so we can focus on that alone will actually help us to bridge the gap between the enemy out there. That enemy is also seeking the same
Hmm.
thing. It is missing in their life, therefore they are scared and fighting. And this is the most healing, most wonderful conscious state of being one can access. So knowledge, AI will help us to tap into all kinds of knowledge, intelligence. Everything is possible. But love,
Hmm.
we have to focus on that vector. That is the future frontier. And communities is the space where relationship, collectivity, bonding,
Hmm.
meaning, purpose, identity, all that come into belonging, all
Belonging.
that come into picture, human to human connection,
Yeah,
all that come into picture.
totally.
So that's the frontier we are in. And so that
Yeah.
way, like in Auroville, this very presence of the spiritual masters, and the very center of Auroville is something called Matri Mandir, the temple of the mother, which practically means divine love. That is the archetype
Hmm.
right at the center. Humanity of the past archetype was the warrior king, the fighter.
Mm.
This is divine love right at the center. Now we have to discover that within us. Without it, we cannot unite with everyone else. Not just with people,
Yeah.
but with the trees, with the nature, with the earth, with the water, with the soil, everything. That sense of oneness can come only when we discover the power of love within us.
Hmm.
And that is the frontier we are in. And community is the space where this can manifest. And if this community is able to harness its energies, creativity, and embody that and manifest and individualize, then we are giving birth
Hmm.
to a whole new global civilization where the nation states must have lived its purpose already. It's outlived, but its
Hmm.
cultural unity, diversity can again re-emerge, and new
Yeah.
expressions can come. And in that space, AI, blockchain, decentralization, all that can come into picture to provide wiring of the
Hmm.
whole thing into, just like a human body is a collection of cells. Same way,
Yeah.
50,000 cells can come together, and technology can provide an excellent framework for people to communicate and wire with each other, connect with each other,
Right.
and bond together. But the bonding will be psychological. That is only on the base or
Hmm.
discovery of the dimension of love that is the mystery deep in the heart of human nature.
Yeah. So if I can map a couple things regarding like Auroville's blueprint, right? So the whole vision came together around the teachings of a spiritual master, and you created a charter
They
based
gave the
on
charter.
that.
We didn't
And
create.
they, yeah,
I,
okay.
this is very important.
And
The
yes,
founders, the state of consciousness of the
yeah,
founders, from where they have conceived it,
uh-huh,
the conception of the seed is the key to everything.
yes,
We coming
hmm,
together intellectually constructing a charter will be very shallow because we are still creating based on fear and our limited cognitive system. So people who
yeah, yeah,
evolved to a state where they embodied that divine love and consciousness, from there they conceived, and
hmm.
we are just opening to it, inspired by it, surrendering to it.
So that love that you speak of is actually like really
Right.
central to the whole creation of the charter. So the charter was created, a master plan for Oroville was created, and then So to where you are now, then, I guess I'm curious about, if you were creating a blueprint to reproduce this, if you're thinking like as a designer, intentionally designing the touch points, right? So it's clear that the process that you're trying to facilitate is this internal journey and this growth and this like self acceptance and this love, this understanding that we are something greater, right? So, what are the things that are conducive to that in the community? I can definitely see how just living in harmony with the land actually is so conducive to that. We're sort of honoring our health and biology by like eating good food and being in right relation with the land, and then sort of cultivating right relation with people, right? Those are such nurturing fundamentals. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
what
would
else? What are
like
some of the key like theses that you're exploring, or some of the
living in
insights?
harmony with nature, organic food, sustainable technologies. All these are byproducts and consequences. Not
Hmm.
these are not the
Mm.
means. These are results.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
the the primary thing is, what is the magnet that is attracting people to come together into a one larger collective being? If you look at a business corporation, it is, most of them, it is money. The moment you stop paying, everyone will disperse off. Without
Yeah.
salary, it won't work. So if money is the attractor, it won't work. Second, if you look at open source communities, people are creating open source wealth not because they are gaining money out of it. It's a one level high. There is an idealism for which they are able to put their time and energy and create wealth that belongs to humanity. And people say, I belong to this open source community. And they create certain identity out of it. They are not doing it for money, they are doing it for a idealism, which is a better magnet than money as a magnet.
Yeah. Definitely better if you're measuring by
Right,
heart power
right.
possibilities, right? Yeah.
And beyond that is where deeper meaning and purpose and love and bonding come into picture. The soul of the community.
Hmm.
What is the
Yeah.
soul of the community where you just adore, admire, and surrender and give yourself?
Mm.
That is where spiritual masters come into picture. Like Auroville is because thousands came and met Mother or Sri Aurobindo and were deeply transformed by the contact because they embodied that universal divine love. And they said, do this, build a city, people are happy, come, I will build it. And I give my life to you.
Yeah.
And we do it at a small scale, at a family scale where two people fall in love. And I want to give my life to you, and we build a family, and I give my life to the family, which is bound and
Hmm.
united by love, and which is the most stable unit of the society, family. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
that is breaking down because of the commercialization of everything. But originally, that was the most stable unit of a society, love based unit where people give themselves freely. Now, if that is to be
Yeah.
built at a larger scale, like Auroville is a larger grouping where it is the spiritual
Hmm.
founders who are the embodiment of that love and the magnet, which is drawing
Hmm.
others to the orbit and say, wow, this is amazing. I want to give myself to it. From there, I will develop my intellectual idealisms or derivative, and sustainable technologies, land, everything is a further derivative. So when people came, they were coming here drawn by the magnet of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Land was
Hmm.
not livable. There was
Yeah.
land was the least attractive of everything. There was no nature as such other than the dead land, and people regenerated it because inside they have love. That love was poured into the
Mm.
land, so land became a beautiful forest, a regenerated ecosystem. In spite of the obstacles, people stayed on for decades and decades and decades. 55 years, 60 years, people are here. That happens only when
Yeah.
you deeply fall in love.
Yeah, I sort of see it's almost we're talking about we've already maxed out rationality. There is something irrational about staying in a place even when it like doesn't welcome you, but it is again, we talk about the power of delusion. Like sometimes you have to not listen to the rational intellectual brain because there is actually a
Right,
higher wisdom. There is something much more meaningful and powerful and in many ways even like useful about saying like hey the intellect should actually be subservient to
right,
love. Sometimes you have to make sure that you are prioritizing that. And I can see how, again, we're talking about cities and cities. So many of them organically were created at ports and at rivers, right? Because it was a certain density of like goods traveling. It turned into economic opportunity. And that's our seed form for cities. Like we just assume that a city is an economic center, but Auroville is saying, what if a city was a heart center
exactly.
first? And then you figure out all the other things that a city requires, but money is not where you start the city. Love is how you start the city,
Absolutely. That's a
spirit.
fantastic way to put it. Historically, it
Mm.
is because there was some river, some good resources around that city built up. Now, this is something entirely different. You have a spiritual
Yeah.
core, and whatever be that region, you convert, transform that region because you have a spiritual core. Now, we are
Yeah.
historically at a stage where cities can be built in the oceans, in the sky, in the space, in other planets, everywhere. But what is the
Yeah.
core with which we will be building those cities? No? That is the key.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what is the magnet that will bring everything together into a beautiful, harmonious whole? And the ecstasy, the bliss of being and becoming, that is to be enabled because human
Hmm.
body is capable of receiving the delight.
I see you're sort of helping me turn some of my thinking around, whereas I was sort of thinking from the like, oh, from resources emerges spirit, but you're telling me that like, no, 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 from spirit resources emerge,
Exactly.
and yeah, I can hear just from the last couple of minutes of this kind of course correction. It's like, right, in some way I was primed to like believe this through my own like spiritual beliefs already, but it was that legacy software that I didn't even quite realize was there because that's just how
Right.
assumptions work, right? You don't know what you don't know until you
Yeah,
realize.
it is still operational and we don't realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so can you tell me because if I go and read about Auroville online, I hear about karma
Yes.
yoga is a term that comes up. Can you please share a little bit more about that?
Yes. Work. All of us need to work. Work
Hmm.
is what brings meaning and purpose. In the normal
Yeah.
society, you work in order to earn some money and sustain yourself. Work is a means to earn, to sustain yourself.
Hmm.
But when work becomes a means to express yourself and grow rapidly, and work
Yeah.
further, work becomes the means to discover the spiritual reality and especially the opening
Hmm.
of the profound love within your heart. There, that is what we refer to as a karma yoga. Yoga simply means union,
Yeah.
union of the isolated, separate
Mm.
droplet, discovering that I am essentially one with the ocean. That is yoga. Now, there is an ocean of love. How do we, through action, enter into it?
Hmm.
And we are engaging in action. Every day, we are making decisions. Is this decision in alignment with my deepest love? And there is something in the depths of our heart that knows the truth. No matter how much the intellect is
Yeah.
justifying, the legacy software is rationalizing. But there is something in us, legacy software might say irrational, delusional, all that. But there is something in
Mhm.
us. Again, we have to distinguish between the frontal heart of emotion that can be quite attached to its emotions, preferences, likes, dislikes. That's not what I'm referring to.
Mhm.
When that is quietened, when you go deeper, there is a quiet gladness and delight of being that is self existent. It has nothing to do with what happening outside. This is your fundamental spiritual
Yeah.
nature. That has to be discovered. And that has a spontaneous guidance. For example, when you are watching a sunset in a beautiful valley, it's not a analytical process. You are immersing in an experience of the sacred. Right. And you don't need explanation where mind becomes silent and your whole being
Mhm.
come to a space of reverence with nature. That experience is accessible to everyone. Yeah.
It's
So
innate. Yeah.
when you're performing any action, can that action be an act of reverence, an action of offering to the spirit of all things? Because it's one beautiful being who has become the mountains, the rivers, the flowers, the animals, the birds, other people, you and me, everything. It's that one universal existence, and its fundamental nature is delight. And we are born out of its delight. It is creating out of it itself, us second by second. Can we relax and trust the
Mhm.
existence and dissolve into it? And can your action be a conscious offering, riding on its wave of becoming and offer to itself?
Mhm.
That is Karma Yoga.
So are you saying that in other words, each of us is born with like a God-given mission and our purpose is to figure out what that mission is and turn it into a
Right. We are
gift?
born like this universal existence has projected itself into time and space as you and me. Right.
Yeah.
Now it is meeting itself in the same space, but it has
Mhm.
molded you in certain way. It has molded me in certain way, but it is the same thing. But when we come together and contact, there is some sense of recognition, right? Because it is
Yeah.
coming from the same source. And but it will
Yes.
articulate and express itself uniquely through you. Just like you have a
Yeah.
unique fingerprint, your expression of that experience of connecting with that will be your what we call in our language swadharma. That is, you have a dharma as an individual. You're born with the
Mhm.
unique dharma, and expressing that is where you experience your fullness, richness of your being, and the delight of your being, harmony of your being.
Yeah.
So discovering that, and that has to be discovered in action. It is not in
Yeah.
meditative retreat you discover, it is in the dance of life, embracing life.
Yeah. Yeah. So how does this how do children get raised in Auroville to sort of discover themselves and discover their gifts? Because it's beautiful because you are not designing based on ideas, although there is a spiritual inspiration behind this, but it's a multi
Right.
generational project. So you've been able to sort of measure and see some of the successes and learn some lessons. Like, how are children raised to discover
So this
their gifts?
education, the core of education is acknowledging that each individual is an evolving soul who is fundamentally of this nature of
Hmm.
ananda, and purpose of education is
Yeah,
help them to attune with it and enable it to find flowering. So in Auroville, there is no
attune. I like
examinations
that.
and tests, and they are not prepared for the job market outside.
Hmm.
They are going through a very different education system where they get to know more about themselves. Like some
Yeah.
of our advanced programs are called ATP, awareness through body. Just making your body conscious and becoming aware of what is within you. This become
Hmm.
more and more central than developing deep capacity for analysis or competition and stuff like that. Our
Mhm.
current education system is largely competition driven, prepared for the market. Now, good thing is it is
Mhm.
collapsing. Now something else is emerging, but what that something else, what the core should be, that is where the spiritual education come into
Yeah.
picture. Who we are. If we put aside the smart intelligence that we thought that is what we are, if machines are outdoing us, then if we put that aside, who are we? So we have to
Mhm.
rediscover ourselves, our new identity, our true identity that is veiled by the rational intelligence. Yes, it's a great capacity compared to an
Mhm.
animal, but still there is much greater capacity that is waiting to be
Mm.
discovered, which is dormant. It can be brought forth, and that is the evolutionary transformation we are in.
Okay. I'm remembering some things you said. First, we sort of we mastered our environment for survival, and then we mastered the world for energy extraction. And, we've birthed AI. We sort of are on this path to mastery of knowledge, but there is a higher tier now that we are
Correct.
evolving to. Okay. And so these children then, because I think, it was so obvious to me, like when you said like sustainability for Auroville was acknowledging financial reality. You needed the community to be able to sustain itself for the long term, and that's among many different in many different ways. And so a measure of success as well is like, can you sustain yourself long term? And it's a multi-generational
Right.
project, right? So on the one hand, the community can certainly grow because of the powerful spiritual attraction for people who really feel called and invited into this mission. But it's also, I guess, I'm curious, are there multi-generational, like how many multi-generational families are there? Do young people leave and return? Like, do most
Yeah,
of
we
them
have three
stay? Like,
generations
what's
already.
that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sustainability is looked from four different layers. One is
Mm.
purely outer material, technological, circular technologies.
Yeah.
Then financial sustainability. Third, psychological sustainability. Fourth is that spiritual core. That is the essence of
Yeah.
sustainability.
Hmm.
And
So you have to not only know all these things, but you have to transmit these learnings to the
correct.
next generation, and they need to believe in it enough to keep
Right.
it
Right.
going.
That is the more it boils down to what degree you are able to live this, because each one of
Hmm.
us is a radiant center of certain state of consciousness.
Hmm.
If you are embodying fear and anxiety, that is what you transmit into the collectivity. If you are embodying love and inspiration, clarity, that is what you will be transmitting. So it will boil down to each one of us increasingly embodying that light and love and radiance, and that is what the
Hmm.
children will pick up, and the rest will be picking up, not what we speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause the Amish have this tradition where they sort of let the young people go experience the outside world before so that they kind of have the
Yeah.
choice. Like they're not just like trapped by the default path. They're sort of introducing a risk to make it a
Right.
real choice, right? Um, do your young people leave? You mentioned how you yourself personally, you just love being there so much. Why would you even leave? I'm curious about the permeability of yeah,
So
the community. How, to what extent do people come and go, move
children who
around,
are
or
children who
just
are
stay
born
there?
and brought up in Auroville, they have to make a conscious choice when they reach 18. Is this their right place?
Mm,
And
wow.
they're also highly encouraged to go out, experience the world outside. Otherwise, this is a bubble in which they live. They have no clue how the
Yeah.
world works. So they are encouraged to
Yeah.
go out, whether it is for studies or work, and then make a conscious choice to come back. Then it is a real choice.
Mhm. Yeah.
And for others, of course, this choice of Auroville is not a job. It is like a soul's commitment. And but
Yeah.
often what happens is, uh, you this is also a laboratory of an accelerated evolution of collective consciousness.
Mm.
So when you step into, you are drawn by the light, inspired by the light. And this also happens between two individuals. They initially get drawn by the light in each other, then the shadows shows up. So
Mhm.
Orwell is a place where you get drawn by the light, but the stuff that is within you, the shadow that needs to undergo transformation, the legacy softwares of your past evolution, your individual and collective legacies, all that will surge up to be transformed.
Mm.
So what happens is, when it shows up, you don't see it in yourself. You project it onto other people that is around. The shadow projection. Then you try to fix everyone else
Yeah.
and not you. And many people spend a lot of time trying to fix others.
Yeah.
And then they get frustrated, or the system is not good enough, this is not good enough, that is not good enough. And then they leave.
Yeah.
So many people have this love and hate relationship. They come, stay for some time, and then it get too much. You go back, and then you come
Yeah.
back, you go back. And then there are those who just come and don't go at all. This is it. And they know this is home,
Yeah.
and they don't have to worry. And for some, they just come in and they just cannot relate. It is way too much. It is crazy. So they don't relate to this
Yeah.
place at all, and then they leave. This is not making sense.
Sure. You spoke earlier about the archetype of the divine mother, right? As a and very different from the patterning of the warrior king, as you brought up. So, if the sort of the phase of evolution for the collective that's required right now is to sort of have a different kind of integration, right? Like, I'm curious, because obviously when we talk about archetypes, it has a relationship to biology because we are embodied
Right.
beings, right? It's no accident that the universe, God birthed us, incarnated us in these bodies with all these layers. It's how we understand the world and understand ourselves. So sex as for men and women, like masculine and feminine, that's a biological reality, but we in ourselves, I love the symbol of like yin and yang. Like we must be integrated. We have our masculine and feminine
Within us,
parts
yes.
inside. And and I'm curious, like because I guess, yeah, it to me, when you talk about that temple, it's like, right, like it's ultimately like love, self acceptance, seeing that I am the same as the whole, I am the larger whole. And I wonder if it's like kind of almost a bigger ask of men to say that, like, because they have to fully embrace and express inside themselves this divine mother energy, if I'm sort of
Yeah.
understanding things correctly.
It will be easier for a woman to embody, because evolutionary historically she has been prepared for that. So as a vessel for that
Yeah.
embodiment, for a woman, the coming future is likely to be the pioneers and the leaders, because it's her very essential nature. But she has to overcome
Yeah.
this attachment into small circles, because she is too much
Mm.
bound within small circle. To expand the heart to include the larger motherhood,
Ah,
that is her problem.
interesting.
Whereas
Yeah.
man went into other direction of the, not embodied spirituality, but the emptiness spirituality, the formless, where
Yeah.
he is renouncing the world, renouncing the woman, renouncing everything power, and going into the formless spirit. But the spirituality of today demands you to come back to this world of multiplicity and embrace the world of multiplicity, where he has to reintegrate with matter. Matter itself come, mother and matter are related words, and matter, the very
Mhm.
essence of matter is love, and mother archetype.
Yeah.
And so in a way, the future leaders and the evolutionary Frontiers, it's easier for a woman, but she has to overcome the usual limited
Mm,
expressions and intensity of that little safe cocoon.
yeah. There's the hero's journey in the Western consciousness is such a known story of the, reluctant hero goes
Right.
out into the world and masters, like grows himself, like masters the challenge, and then is able to sort of come home or claim a throne or something like that story is obvious and known, but I can't think of a myth from any of the traditions that I was raised in that teaches men and women what they're supposed to do in this divine mother integration that you speak
We have a
of.
beautiful archetypal story. It actually comes from Mahabharata, Indian Mahabharata tradition, of which Sri Aurobindo took a small episode from it and elaborated it into a whole mantric poem called Savitri. Savitri is the
Mm,
incarnate divinity in the woman's body.
yeah.
uh, and she was born to save. And she was the daughter of a king, and she reached age of marriage, but she was so splendid, no one dared to ask her hand. And the father told her,
Mm,
now you have to find someone suitable for you. And she goes out in search of the right man. And then in a forest, she meets a young man, and she realizes he is the one. And
mm,
so she comes back and reports, I found. And he happened to be son of a king in exile in a forest. King who became blind, and blind king's son, but they're living in the forest. Then king approves, yes, this you can marry her. But at that time, the Narad, one rishi, comes and says, but this boy will die within 1 year.
mm.
And then that was a big shocker. But Savitri will say, no, I will marry him because this is her soul's choice. And she marries him. And then there is the whole tapasya of Savitri to now how to overcome death. This is
Yeah.
also connected with Sri Aurobindo's work of evolutionary future, where humanity will overcome the process of death. Yeah.
Mm,
And she does her tapasya and discover her true divine nature. And then the 1 year completes, Satyavan dies. But she goes after the god of death, and there is a battle with the god of death, a debate with the god of death, and transforms the god of death
mm,
and brings back Satyavan. And she embodies the divine mother's love, love conquering death. And
mhm.
that is right at the core of Auroville. And she is
Yeah.
the protagonist. So, archetypally, we have Matrimandir and Savitri, that is holding our collective culture. And this story of death being conquered by love.
Yeah. No, that's powerful. So the name of our project, Amagi, comes from an ancient Sumerian word. Are you
No.
familiar with it? So it has kind of two meanings, and one is return to
Ah,
mother, which is, I think, a very beautiful harmony in our projects, and why it feels like,
sounds
oh
so
yeah,
familiar. Yeah,
we're going to download this software. This feels like
right.
of our lineage, right? It's very aligned. But the other is freedom, freedom from bondage, freedom from slavery. There is this practice um, where a culture, a society was so enshackled by slavery that like you couldn't get out of it anymore because like everything's like literally like locked up in that way. And so the benevolent king said, you know what, I free everyone from bondage. The only way we can have a sane, healthy, functional society is to cast off these bonds. Like, let's have a big reset. And so, these two thematic messages, I think, feel very powerful into this moment, and why we're connecting with like other leaders, other visionaries, to learn, right? Because we don't assume that we know what's right. And there's something very beautiful to me about with our modern technology and all of the choice and freedom that we have to really respect and honor like ancient wisdom. It's like we don't have to
Yeah,
figure everything out on our own, right? A lot of things actually have
already.
been figured
Yes.
out. And when I was looking into these Sumerian myths to try to educate myself a little bit more, this story, I can't remember the name, but this archetypal story of the woman who goes into the underworld to bring back her lover. There are forms of this story, and I think like I can think of like in the Greek tradition of a man going into the underworld to bring together to retrieve his lover, but this woman going. This seems to be an
Yeah.
older story. Once I started
No,
digging.
it resonates so much with our founder's life because she
Ah.
herself was going into the so-called underworld psychologically because the legacy softwares
Mm-hmm.
are all ingrained in our cellular consciousness.
Ooh, yeah. That
Body
shadow work
consciousness.
that we talk
Body
about.
is built of cells, and each cell carries the memory, and the death is a process that is
Yeah.
wired into cells. So she was entering
Yes.
into body consciousness, into the cellular consciousness, and rewiring it and transforming them
Mm.
and going through the experience of death, because cells die in thousands every day in the body, and that is a
Yeah.
habit in the body. And she even says death is a stupid habit in the body consciousness. And the work of transformation of the cellular consciousness, that was the last stage of work she was involved in to accelerate the human
Mm.
evolution, where she was cleaning up the legacy software embedded at the very cellular level.
I find another layer of humor in like death as a stupid habit because I think it just is, personally, there's a lot about the Christian faith that I'm very moved by. But one of the sticking points for me is just like reincarnation just makes sense. Like, how could a loving God like only give us one chance? And it's
Yeah.
like pass fail forever. Like, and what I've really just noticed in my life and my spiritual journey is that like you're going to keep coming back to those lessons like until you really learn that lesson, like not just here but like all the way through yourself, right? You're going to keep learning that. And so like yes, death is a stupid habit is because you need to keep dying and being reborn because you haven't learned the lesson yet. That hits me on some
Yeah,
level.
and the very fact that certain things spontaneously resonate with you and you
Hmm.
recognize, that is truth. That is
Yeah.
because there is something of the past births already there in you
Hmm.
that knows and it recognizes. Therefore, you may look into Sumerian myth or this or that and spontaneously connect, hey, there is something there. And it cannot be
Yeah.
explained by your current education. There is something else that
Mm.
is, this is not legacy software, it is like soul's inheritance.
I hear you. Yeah.
And that recognition, that trail is what opens to your own authentic journey. And that
Yeah.
makes it an adventure.
And so is Auroville an emerging blue zone? Are you guys figuring out your way past this habit of death? What's the longevity scene
No,
like?
Auroville, especially in the last 3 years, our death rate has spiked.
Mm.
We are also going through a great deal of political crisis. There is a government
Mm.
takeover happening. It's like conflict with the state,
Oh
and
gosh, yeah.
there is a massive battle that is going on. From though it has positive sides as well. It's not just entirely negative because we were in a
Death, as we said, is
Yeah,
a
we
part of
were
the
in a
process.
highly decentralized situation where we were not able to come together and act together as a whole. But now we are pushed into a highly centralized new form. Oh, your daughter is here.
Pardon me. Somebody needs me for a second.
Lovely.
Fiona, this is my friend Manoj I'm
Hello.
talking to.
Namaste.
Fiona, did we say sawadee ka? You don't have to talk, okay? Do you want to stay on my lap? Okay. Okay. I think this is sort of my
Ah.
countdown timer, but sorry, I would love to still follow this thread that you mentioned. So,
So right now we are
you
going
know,
through, yeah,
some death throes, right? The death throes of the
yeah.
nation state in this current form, perhaps, is being expressed in many ways. So, what's the conflict these
So
days?
there is government appointed officials who are centralizing everything and putting in systems that wires everything together. In a way, those parts are very good. But then, if it lasts too
Yeah,
long, it can kill the diversity and the individual liberty and freedom and creativity of the place, and it can become another government department. That will be a disaster. But I hope it will
yeah,
last only for a few years to put this into the right framework. After that, it should leave, because
yeah,
after all, this place is set in motion by a greater consciousness. People are only agents
yeah,
and instruments, and also to look at all this as part of nature, one nature playing with itself,
yeah.
not to look in terms of black and white, good and evil, but everything has a place to play. So that's a crisis we are going through. And there is certain spike of death that is happening in the last 3 years. But in terms of longevity, the ashram of Sri Aurobindo, their crossing 100 has become quite normal, but not in Auroville. Auroville is death rate is much earlier, because this is also kind of a battlefield. Very uh,
It's a hard life on the
there is
frontier.
it's pretty hard, but at the same time, the adventure is so intense and amazing. Mhm. It's worth the adventure. So longevity wise, research is not necessarily happening in that way, because this is still in the very early stage of figuring out the governance itself. We haven't figured out our finances, our governance. So this power dimension has to be sorted.
Yeah, I'm sort of, something that is very interesting to me is I wonder how well this experiment could have survived in a different place. Because, you talked about the hippies. There was a
Yeah,
big
it is
movement at the
huge.
time, right? Like, this was not unique. In many ways, there was a very, very strong drive to explore
Yeah.
something new. But my understanding is a lot of those communities in the United States phased out. They were not successfully multi-generational because of healthcare costs. And that is kind of like a uniquely like American thing because of the culture, because of the legalities, because of the costs. Like, if they didn't people getting sick and having to pay hospital bills like literally just wiped out communities. It just made them no longer sustainable. But I think in some ways, because India, it's such a huge country, because parts of India were not developed in the same way, but also the state emerged around you in a different way that it sort of contributed. It created enough space for you to run this
Yeah,
experiment.
experiment became successful, or state is able to support because of the founders, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, whom highly regarded by the all people. So that way, there is a great deal of protection to the experiment. In fact, birth of Auroville was supported by all the nations. When Auroville project was floated, in a way, it was floated in the context of Cold War. Russia and US was about to self-destruct. Then the founder, the mother, wanted all the nations to come together and collaborate in doing one project instead of being in confrontation and fight. If there is a seed of collaboration that can tilt the balance. So she floated the idea of building a universal city where all people from all the people from all over the nations can come together and build a unified human life. And all the nations, United Nations, took this, and there was a UNESCO resolution, and every nation sent a boy and a girl with a handful of soil, including US and Russia, for the foundation ceremony of Auroville. So that was a symbolic act of nations coming together. And not only government of India, but all the nations were involved in creation of this seed.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. We're coming on the end of this conversation, so I might ask uh, for the final takeaway. So, for those of us who are not blessed with a spiritual teacher to sort of give us that divine light of Genesis for our own communities, what are perhaps some of the top 3 lessons that you want to share from Auroville for those of us who want to launch our own communities?
First is to having clarity on the central magnet and the relationship, how to realize it in life, how to apply. But one thing is to have clarity on what is the central magnet. Second is how to realize it as a what is the process of realizing it, embodying it. I think these two are enough.
Okay, so know what your magnet is and
To
know
embody.
how you actually embody that. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me today. It was really fun to sort of hear, yeah, just the story, your wisdom. You really turned around some of my thinking, and it's so wonderful to hear, from an elder in this movement. So we're not just working with theories and ideals, but really just a lived experience.
Thank you. It was really wonderful to have this conversation with you, to really feel there is so much emergence happening now in the world. There is so much seeking. And thank you
Yeah.
for giving this opportunity to share.
Yes, very excited to be sharing this. Yeah, continue to share this message on and keep spreading
Yes,
that
thank
aura.
you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Lily Zabo, and this has been the Amagi Village Podcast. Amagi is the ancient Sumerian word for return to mother. It's also the earliest denotation of emancipation and freedom. Not freedom through escape, but through return, through restoration, integration, through rebirth. The world is quickly changing, and the myth of modernity is coming undone. Progress is not linear, and to thrive in the coming age, we can't keep living in the matrix and just hoping for the best. It's time to embark on bold experiments. We don't claim to know what the answer is, but we know it won't come from ideology. This isn't a cult, it's not a brand. Amagi is an invitation for those who don't just play with new ideas, but are ready to live them, to walk the talk, to build the future. The Amagi Village Podcast documents our journey of discovery. We're learning in public from technologists and tribal elders, from philosophers and farmers. Let's reimagine the future together. Please visit amagi.life to learn more. That's amagi.life.